All right, so today we're going to do the cognition fill in the blank review. I would suggest writing this down as well as writing down any additional notes. So there's three things we're going to be reviewing here. So memory, thinking and language, and then intelligence. All right, so memory. We get information into our brain by the process of encoding. That's the first stage in the memory process. Storage is going to be the next one. Information stays there because of the process of storage. And third is going to be the process of retrieval, and that's getting it back out. Okay, so remember, important things stay in the brain the more that you use them. If we don't pay attention, we're not going to encode it. Storage, it means that you are actually paying attention to it and you're coming up with some sort of mnemonic device. Retrieval means getting it out. When someone consciously repeats information over and over, they're going to be in the process of storing it. Again, that's going to be studying it. We know that the testing effect is how you are likely to get information to stay into the brain. Jack remembers the first and last part of a list and forgets the middle. This demonstrates the serial position effect. The serial position effect states in a long string of numbers or items for the grocery store, you're likely to forget the middle, and you'll remember the beginning, which is called the primacy effect, and the end, which is called the recency effect. Memory aids are known as mnemonics. There's several of them that were mentioned in the book, such as there's like memory castles, there was the peg word system, there's multiple, but I'm assuming those won't be on this year's test. Fleeting photographic memory is going to be a iconic memory, so iconic is going to be visual, and fleeting auditory memory is going to be known as echoic. So again, fleeting means that it's very quick, and sensory memory, they're both types of sensory memory, which are the shortest types of memory. They last for fractions of a second. Remembering who is the 41st president of the United States is an example of a declarative memory, the memory of facts. Declarative memories are also called explicit memories. You have to be conscious of them. You have to work at trying to encode them and keep them in your brain, as you know that you're trying to do that right now for your AP exam. The memory of how to tie your shoes is called a procedural memory. That's going to be stored in the cerebellum, and those are also nicknamed implicit memories. So implicit are procedural memories that are stored in your cerebellum, and declarative factual memory is stored all over your cerebral cortex. Without rehearsal information, will never enter. So if you don't actually rehearse information, you're never going to enter into the long-term memory. So if you don't actively try to encode and store, it's never going to stick in long-term memory. Sandy remembers her 12th birthday and the day she completed a lap around the track. This is an example of an episodic memory. This is a type of long-term memory. So think of like episode of your life. Episodic memory, again, has to do with you, something from your personal life. For most people, 9/11 is an example of a flashbulb memory. Flashbulb memory is going to be very crystal clear emotional memory that you recall. And again, flashbulb memories are usually going to be very clear because they're emotional. Remembering things at the beginning of the list is called the primacy effect. The brain part that plays an integral part in memory is called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is part of the limbic system. The hippocampus is turned on by adrenaline. All right, spelling haircut as haircut after you've been viewing pictures of rabbits is called priming. So priming is where we can actually subconsciously kind of be tricked. Our memory can be tricked based on, again, things like seeing a picture of a rabbit that can actually change the way you remember something. The fact that our memory of when our boyfriend or girlfriend woke up with us comes most easily when we are depressed is an example of a mood congruent memory. So again, these are tends to recall information that are consistent with one's current mood. So there's mood congruent and there's state dependent memory. So state dependent has to do with like altered states. So I drink alcohol, I take cold medicine, I drink caffeine. Mood congruent has to do again with the mood that you're in. The fact that Joe keeps mixing up his old girlfriend's phone number and new girlfriend's phone number exemplifies blank, this disruptive effect of prior learning or new information. So he keeps on mixing up his old with his new girlfriends. So this is going to be the old blocks new, and that's going to be proactive interference. So if you remember the mnemonic, PORN, proactive, old blocks new, retroactive, new blocks old. When new information makes it harder to recall old information, so again, new information makes it harder to recall old information, that's going to be retroactive interference. The neural basis for learning and memory appears to be long-term potentiation. Again, long LTP, or long-term potentiation, is linked with kind of like when you lift muscles or lift weights, your muscles become more dense. Same thing that happens with your brain. Sue fell and hit her head. She cannot remember anything that happened after the accident. This is an example of anterograde amnesia. She can't remember anything after, so anything new. And John had swelling in his brain, cannot remember anything before the trauma, and that's going to be retrograde amnesia. A lot of people get the amnesias and the interferences mixed up, so make sure you know those. And those have appeared quite a bit on free responses. Thinking and language. A shortcut to problem solving, for example, B before E, I before E, before except if there's C, sorry, typo, is called a heuristic or rule of thumb. These are quick, but they're not always accurate. Taking the long way to ensure a problem is solved correctly is an algorithm. Again, it takes a long time, but it's going to always be accurate. Rules of grammar are called syntax. Metacognition means thinking about thinking. A blank is the most typical example of a category. A concept is a typical example of a category. Or prototype. So concept or prototype. So prototype actually would work better there, especially since they talk about representative heuristics quite a bit. So if I were to say bird, the first bird that pops into your head is going to be a prototype in your typical example. If I said sparrow, sparrow, again, is like most birds we see in our backyard. However, there are things like penguins and ostriches that are not like a sparrow, and so that's why it's, again, helps with problem solving, but it's not airproof and can lead to problems with thinking. A word or part of a word that has meaning in the word, but by itself has no meaning, is called a blank. The small sinus sound that carries meaning is called a morpheme. Okay, the smallest part of a word that doesn't have meaning, just sound, that's phoneme. Psychologists, specifically Wolfgang Kohler, have shown that some chimps show insight, the sudden and often novel realization of a problem. This is the aha moment. Jake is unable to see a problem from a fresh perspective. He keeps trying to repeat solutions that have worked in the past. This is called a mental set. So a mental set usually can be helpful. It's the way that we approach a problem. However, if you sometimes have a new situation, this can cause a problem and can cause immense frustration. Janie's inability to realize that her sewing thread can be used as floss is an example of a functional fixedness. Unable to come up with a new use for a familiar object is called functional fixedness. The fact that most people are afraid of flying because of their vivid memory of spectacular plane crashes, even though car accidents are much more common, is the result of a availability heuristic, estimating the likelihood of events based on availability heuristic. Again, representative heuristic, availability heuristic show up lots of times on the AP exam. Availability, if you don't have any available memory of it, you're likely to say it's not going to happen. If representative, you have a representative prototype, all right, and I remember P, prototype, that you compare everything against. And again, the prototype is your ideal image in your head. A rule of thumb for judging the likelihood of things in terms of how well they seem to represent or match a prototype. For example, the man must be a professor, not a truck driver, because he is thin and has a beard and looks and likes books, is called A, and this is going to be a representative heuristic. A tendency to search for information that confirms one's preconceptions is called confirmation bias. How an issue is blank can significantly affect decisions and judgments the way an issue is posed. This is framing, also called wording bias. Clinging to one's initial conceptions after the basis on which they have been framed has been discredited is called belief perseverance. So even though you've been proven wrong, you still stick to it. That's belief perseverance. That's the moon lady. Smallest distinctive sound unit in a language is called phonemes. A rule of the system of rules in language that allow us to communicate is going to be syntax or grammar. The rules in which we use to make sentences is called grammar. So system of rules, those two are in general going to be is synonymous with each other. You can switch them. I doubt on a test that they would make you tell the difference between those. So grammar rules and syntax are the same thing. Semantics means meanings of words. So Bill Clinton argues over the meaning of the word is an example of semantics. 19. Blank blank believed the capacity for language is inborn and that all humans are born with blank. This is going to be Noam Chomsky, and they're born with a universal inborn language device or universal inborn grammar. Remember, he believed that babies all coo and babble the same sounds, which means that it has to be innate. However, in order for them to fully learn language, they have to be exposed to it. 20. Blank blank came up with the linguistic relativity hypothesis, which states that language determines the way we think. So this is going to be Benjamin Whorf. This is also called linguistic relativity or linguistic determinism. Those are other words that you may see for Benjamin Whorf's theory. Basically, if you don't have a word for it, your culture doesn't value it. The more words you have for something, your culture values. Even if they're slang words, those are going to show that you have value in that particular word. All right, intelligence. If you obtain a percentile rank of 90 in the class of 2003, that means that you have ranked higher than 90% of the students. Blank means your score will be compared relatively to a pre-tested group, standardization. An achievement test measures what you have learned. The AP Psych exam is an example of this. A blank measures the capacity to learn and predicts future performance. That's going to be an aptitude test, such as the SAT or IQ test. The original IQ calculation was calculated by mental age divided by chronological age times 100. This was not a very good calculation because once you reached a certain age, your intelligence capped out and if not started to decrease, and general intelligence stays stable over time. This enables researchers to determine the primary components on intelligences by identifying clusters of items that measures a common ability. The key thing is clusters of related items, and that's going to be factor analysis. Robert Sternberg identified 3 types of intelligences. Those are going to be creative, practical, and analytical. When a test measures what it's supposed to measure, it has validity. When a test yields consistent results, it's said to be reliable. An extra chromosome in one genetic makeup causes Down syndrome. If a pilot achieves a high score on a flight aptitude test and also does well in in-flight training, the test is said to have high predictive validity. Let's go back here really quick about the theories. The other theories besides Robert Sternberg that you should know are going to be Charles Spearman. He has something called G factor. He believes it's a genetic, predetermined intelligence that's going to predict how you do in life. Then there's the Howard Gardner, who has a theory of multiple intelligences, and he basically says that you can be musical, you can be creative, you can be interpersonal, intrapersonal, and that's called MI. All right. So good job. You guys completed the video, and I wish you the best of luck.